Hi everyone, in this subdivision surface modeling exercise we're going to do a disk like the one you see in this image here, and this is a render of a free kitbash object that I found a while ago, and it doesn't look so bad if you take a look at this render. But if you take a look at the wireframe of this object, you can see it's a total mess. So we're going to try and do this with subdivision surfaces, and we're going to create proper topology and use only quads for this object. This is going to be a fairly long tutorial, but it's meant for beginners, so I thought I'd explain a few things along the way. So I hope you don't mind that. And we're not going to use any plugins except for WonderMesh, which is a free plugin. I will post a link in the video description, and I will also post a link to the reference image we're going to use to model this object. So this is a render of the top view of the kitbash object, and we're going to use that as a basis to create our version of this object. I hope you'll enjoy this tutorial. Let's get started. First of all, we need a reference image, so let's go to the top view and hit Shift A, go to Image and Reference, and just go to the folder where you stored your reference image, and I'm going to load this PNG file here. And I'm going to rename that to ref image, and over here in the outliner I'm going to switch on the selectable filter, and I'm going to use that for this reference image, so now we can't accidentally select and move it around. If you click on this red icon, you will jump to the settings for the image in the properties panel, and down here I'm going to change the depth to front to make sure the image always is in front of our objects. And I'm going to switch the image off for the perspective view, and let's switch on opacity and bring that down a little bit. Right now we can't select the image or rotate it in the viewport, but we can still use the side panel here and go to item and transform, and we can rotate the image, and I want to rotate it 18 degrees in order to line this circular shape up with the y-axis here. Let's hit N to hide the side panel again. So now we can create some geometry, and I'm going to start with a flat object, hit Shift A and go to WonderMesh primitives, and let's add a ring here. And down here in the object data properties, you can see all of the settings under the WonderMesh data section here. And we can change some things here, but we can also do things like scale the object here in the viewport. Let's zoom into this area here, and I'll scale this down again a little bit. Right now we have 24 segments, and that's not enough. We have this slight curve here, and we need at least 2 polygons to define that curve. So that means we need to crank up the number of segments, and I'll go for 60 here. It's not a perfect match, but it's close enough. Let's scale this back up a little bit, like so. And I'm going to rename this disk to Big Inner, and hit Shift and D to make a duplicate. Right click to keep it in position here, and I'm going to rename the copy to Big Outer, and I'm going to scale this up to about here, and I'm also going to use an inner radius for this, and let's bring this up to about here. Let's zoom in a little bit. You can hold down Shift and left click and drag to fine-tune this. Even though the decimal numbers will not be shown here, you can still fine-tune it by holding down Shift and dragging like so. Let's hit H to hide this object, select the other disk, and I'm going to make another copy, Shift D, right click, and I'm going to scale this down, rename this to small, and I'm going to move it up to about here, scale it down a bit, and line it up with this edge here in the reference image. And you can see right now we have way too many segments on this small disk. We need to reduce the number of segments and match it up with the geometry of that bigger disk here. I'm going to scale this up again and line it up with the cutout. Let's do something like this. And then I'm going to reduce the segments of this disk to 16. Looks about right. Again, not a perfect match, but we're going to make it work. As for the inner disk, I'm also going to use an inner radius here. And again, holding down Shift and dragging to fine tune the radius here. Let's do something like this. And next I want to add some additional edge loops here. And I want to do that because we're going to move some points around. And when we do that, we're going to change the width of the segments here at the center, which is not what I want. Everything here at the center should stay nice and even to make sure we get a nice and circular shape when we subdivide the object later. Before I add those loops, I'm going to convert this Wonder Mesh object to a regular mesh with this button here. And then I'm going to tab into Edge mode, and I'm going to hit A twice to deselect everything, and then I'm going to use Ctrl R, and sometimes that doesn't work, but it should work if I zoom out a little bit. So Ctrl R, left click, and then just scale this down to about here, and let's do another Ctrl R and create a loop here, and we'll need another one here, and one more about here. And that's all looking very good. So let's jump into vertex mode. Next we'll need snapping. You can switch snapping on over here just by clicking on this icon. I prefer to hold down Control. The important thing is that you have vertex selected in this drop down here. So let's grab this vertex here, hit G, and then hold down Control and snap it to this point on the smaller disk. And I'll do the same thing here. And over here, I'll grab this vertex and hit G twice so I can slide it along this edge. And then I'm going to hold down Control and snap it to the edge of this smaller disk here. And then we can select everything here at the center, hit Control I to invert the selection, and then X and delete the vertices. So that's all the geometry that we need for this one. Let's go ahead and unhide the outer ring here, and I'm going to select it and jump into vertex mode, grab these 6 verts here, do Control I to invert the selection and delete the vertices. And on this one we need another edge loop at the center in order to be able to create this shape here. So Control R, left click, right click to place it right at the center here. Let's jump back into object mode, select this disk, and what I'll do with this one is we need to first of all scale it down a little bit to about here. And let's go into face mode, hit I and do an inset like this, and I'm going to do another inset like so. Then hit X and delete these faces, and we can also delete these vertices here. And then I'm going to select this object again and go to vertex mode, grab this vert and slide it over, hold down Control and snap it to this edge on the smaller disk here. And this vertex I'm going to snap to this point, and this one to this point up here. And let's select our small disk again, and I'm going to move this vertex and snap it to here. And once we've done that, we can select all 3 objects and hit Ctrl J to combine them into a single object. And if you take a look at the side panel here, you can see the scale is slightly off. So I'm going to hit Ctrl A and apply the scale. And let's hide the side panel again. And let's go into vertex mode. I'm going to select all the vertices, hit M and do a merge by distance. And this will remove 3 vertices, as you can see down here. Next, I'm going to close that gap in here, and I'm going to do this in edge mode. I'll select these 2 edges here and hit F to close that gap, and then we can select this edge and hit F twice. And actually that's not how I want to do this. Let's go back a step. I'm going to select this additional edge here and use the F key again, and then select this edge and fill the remaining gap. And that's basically all the geometry that we need. I think we can now start extruding some polygons here. So let's select this polygon, hold down Control and Shift, click on this one to select all of these, and I'm going to extrude these up maybe 3 units, and I'm going to select these ones and extrude them up another 3 units. And let's go ahead and deselect these ones. And I'm going to do another extrusion, and this time I'm going to use an offset of 4. And I'm going to use the circle select tool next, that is the C key on the keyboard, and grab all of these polygons here. And I'm going to extrude these up a little bit higher. Let's do maybe 6. And select these ones over here and extrude those up 5 units maybe. And before we continue, let's clean this up a little bit. I'm going to select these polygons here, and these ones, and these ones, and also everything over here. Hit X and delete the faces. And let's go back to the select tool. I'm going to loop select these edges here, and these ones at the back, and X, and dissolve the edges here. Okay, so that's looking good so far. If I go back into object mode and hit Ctrl 2 to apply a subdivision surface modifier to this, and also I'm going to right click and shade the object smooth, you can see that we have a pretty sharp corner here, and we don't really want that. If you take a look at the reference image, we have very soft transitions here, and we do have some sharp corners back here, but over here the transition is much softer and we don't have the geometry to support that, so we need to change that. Before I do though, I'll go to the modifier properties over here and change the levels viewport to 3, and I'm going to switch the subdivision surface modifier off for edit mode. And now if I jump into edit mode, I won't have subdivision, and if I go back to object mode, the object will be subdivided. So let's go ahead and delete this vertex here, and then I'm going to bridge these two edges with the F tool and select this edge here, hit F, and this one, and F again to close these gaps. And this will give us two triangles here. I'm going to get rid of this one at the bottom right away, and we'll take care of the other one a little bit later. Let's go into top view here. Hit K for the knife tool. I'm going to snap to this vertex here, then hit Z to cut through the object, and let's snap the knife to the center of this edge here. So left click and then hit spacebar to finish the tool. Select this edge and dissolve it. And what I'm also going to do in vertex mode is I'm going to grab these edges, these vertices here, and I'm going to move these up a little bit to line them up with the shape up here. And you can see I accidentally selected one down here. I just hit Z and go to wireframe, and I'm going to deselect everything, and let's just grab these ones now and move these up a little bit, line them up with the shape in the image, and I'm going to grab this one and move it over a bit. And let's see down here. Actually, I think I'm going to keep things as they are. That's not looking too bad. Let's go back to edge mode, Z, and go back to solid mode. And I'm going to select the edge loop down here and extrude this, and right click immediately after I hit the extrude button. And then I'm going to move these edges down a little bit like so. And that's looking good. Next I'm going to add some chamfers. I'm going to add one here right at the front. So select these edges here, Control B, and let's do a bevel like so. And let's go to the top view. We also need to add a bevel up here, so I'm going to loop select these edges, Control B, and bevel those. Let's do something like this. And over here I'm going to select these edges, Control B, and bevel those. Next I'm going to add the control edges, and let's start over here. I'm going to loop select these edges here, and these ones at the back. Yeah, not these ones though. Let's deselect those. So I need these and these. And let's use Control B. And this is not working. Let's just go to vertex mode, grab everything, use the M key and merge by distance. that wasn't the problem. Let's go back to edge mode. I'll just try and do that again. Select these edges here. And the ones at the back. Control B, and this is looking a lot better. Let's do something like this. And once you left click, you have access to the operator panel. We need to change the segments to 2 and the shape to 1. And then we can also adjust the distance if we wanted to. But I think this is looking good. I'm going to keep this as it is. So let's go to object mode. I want to do a couple of different versions here. So I'm going to hit Shift and D to duplicate the object and move this over a bit. No matter what we do, we're going to create quite a lot of geometry for this object here. And I want to try and reduce the geometry a little bit by doing different versions that have different numbers of control edges. The object that I've just created is how you would usually do it. So you have a control edge on either side of the corner. But because the distance between these edges here is so small, I think we can get away with fewer control edges. So I'll select this object again, go back into edit mode, and I'm going to loop select these edges here again. Not this one, these ones here. And I'm going to dissolve these, and I'm also going to dissolve the ones here at the back. And if I tab back into object mode, and let's also go to the overlays and switch off wireframe, you can see there's a difference, but it's not that big. On this object here, where we have all the control edges, the edges are a little more defined, and over here, the edges are a little bit softer. But actually, that's not looking too bad. And like I said, we're going to save a lot of polygons if we use fewer control edges. Let's do one more version. I'm going to select this object here, Shift D to duplicate it, and let's move this over and jump into edit mode. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in a couple more edges again. And I'm using the loop knife for that. So Control R, left click, right click, and we'll do this here and here and over here. And let's jump back into object mode. And you can see there's not much difference between this one and this one. The edges are a little bit sharper maybe. So pick your poison. You can do any of these versions if you want to. I will stick with the lower poly version here at the center. So I'm going to delete this one and this one again. Switch on my wireframe again. Select this object and go back into edit mode, and let's continue adding control edges. I'm going to continue with these ones here at the front. Control B to bevel them a little bit. I'll make the corner pretty sharp, and then I'm going to loop select these edges here again and dissolve them. And I'll do the same thing up here. Just make sure to deselect everything first before I select the loops here. Control B, and let's do something like this, and then loop select these edges here and dissolve them again. And I'm also going to loop select these ones and move them up a little bit. I don't want that hole to be that deep. Okay, and next I'm going to add control edges over here. So let's grab these edges, again Control B, and let's do something like this. I'll change that to 1. And over here I'll do the same thing. So loop select these ones and these ones here at the top. Control B and change the width to 1. And now we're going to take care of these edges here at the top. So again, let's loop select these. And over here, we also need to select these ones because otherwise we're going to have some problems in this area here. So let's go ahead and bevel these again with a width of 1. And I'm going to space these edges here apart a little bit further, just so we don't get areas that are too dense here. So left click and control left click over here, then shift left click, control left click, shift left click, control left click, and then right click, go to loop tools and use the space option. I'm using this a lot, so I assigned a shortcut to it. And let's do something like this. Go to vertex mode and let's select these two verts here, and I'm going to scale these up a little bit. Maybe do something like this. And let's go into object mode. And if I switch off the wireframe here, you can see we get some pinching here, but I think we can simply solve that by selecting all the vertices, hit M and do a merge by distance, and you can see we removed a couple of vertices here. So now if we go back into object mode and subdivide the object, everything looks fine. And I think now would be a good time to get rid of that triangle up here. Arguably you could keep it, or you could turn this into an n-gon because it's a flat surface, but I want to turn everything into quads here. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. Let's go to edge mode, and one way to resolve this triangle is to select these edges here. So right click and subdivide, and then we could select this vertex here, use GG and slide this over, and now we have quads here. Another way of doing this would be to select these edges instead, and we can subdivide these, and then we could select these two vertices here and hit J to connect them and dissolve this edge here, which would also turn this area into quads. And the third way to do this is to add more edges here. I'll just go back to my select box here and grab all of these edges and this one, and I'm going to subdivide them. And then what I'll do is I'll grab these vertices here and merge them here. And I'm using a machine tools for that, by the way. Let's see, can we do this here? First, last. No, in Blender we only have first and last. In this case it doesn't really matter. You can use the Blender merge options as well. And then we could just move this vert around to about here and select this edge and dissolve it. So this will also turn this area into quads. And maybe let's move this one over a little bit like so. And I kind of like this option. If I subdivide this, we're getting a very nice and clean result. Let's go and take a look at this. And this looks very nice. Let's go ahead and change to matcap here. So we're getting a very nice transition here. But we do need to make some changes, because down here we now have this straight section and we need to adjust the vertices to turn this into a nice curve. So let's switch to wireframe mode, and I'll switch to the top view here. And all we need to do really is select these verts here and move them back a bit like so to create this curve here. And over here I'm going to select these verts and move those back as well. Let's do something like this, and we can move this vertex around a little bit and do something like this. And let's hit Z and go back to solid mode here, switch to edge mode. And there's one more thing I want to do before we start copying this piece of geometry around and complete our object. And what I want to do is even out the geometry a little bit, and you don't need to do this necessarily, but I like to do this to keep my meshes nice and clean. So I'm going to select everything here and use the loop tools to space these apart evenly, like so. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, but before I do, actually we need to add some more control edges over here. And look, I screwed things up over here. I'll just delete these edges. So what we need to do is grab these edges here and these ones over here, Control B and bevel those Let's do something like this. And that means we have some n-gons again, and we need to clean up the geometry. So let's start down here, and we can select these words here and use M and merge at the center, and then dissolve this edge here. And let's go ahead and move this word around a little bit. Let's do something like this. And over here at the top, we can do something similar. So again, select these 4 words. What am I doing? I'm pressing the wrong button. That's what I'm doing. So hit M again, and let's merge these at the center. And maybe we could slide this over a little bit. Let's do something like this and select this edge and dissolve it. So that's taking care of these areas, and we still need to fix the area down here. And here I'm going to use the knife tool. So let's hit K to activate the knife tool, and I'm going to snap to this point and make a cut all the way to here. Then hit E so we can continue using the knife tool and making a new cut. And I'm going to make a cut like this, hit E again, and I'm going to cut from this point here over to this one. And then hit spacebar to finish the knife tool, and let's go to edge mode and dissolve the edges that we don't need. And we also need to fix this area up here, and we'll do this the same way as before. Let's use the knife tool and make a cut like this. And I'm going to make another one over here and one more over to here. And then again, we can dissolve the edges that we don't need anymore. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And now I'm going to select all of the edges here, and these ones, and the ones at the back here. And we can use the loop tools again to space these apart evenly, like so. Let's go to the top view and have a look. Going to switch to wireframe here, grab these edges and maybe move these up a little bit, like so. Okay, I think that's looking good. We forgot one edge loop here. So let's go ahead and select the edges up here, and let's do another bevel. And again, I'll use an offset or a width of 1. Okay, there's one more thing that I want to do here. If you take a look at this, you can see the control edges here and up here. If I go to object mode and the object gets subdivided, you can see that the control edges get pulled away quite a bit from their original position. And that's because we don't have any geometry in between here. And down here at the bottom, I don't actually want to add any more geometry. At least the edges get pulled away evenly. But up here it's a different story, because we have polygons that have different widths, and that means if we subdivide the object we get a sharper bevel here and a softer bevel here, and I want to keep this even, so I will add a little more geometry up here. And we can do that with the loop knife tool. I'm going to add 2 edge loops here, left click and right click, select this edge and GG to slide this one over a little bit, and GG to slide this one over a little bit, like so. And now when we subdivide the object, these 2 edges here will get pulled in quite a bit, but that's okay. But the control edges will basically stay in place. So if I switch to object mode, you can see the control edges are not moving that much anymore. Okay, so now let's jump back into object mode, and I'm going to remove the subdivision surface modifier for now. And now we can use a mirror modifier to mirror this over to the other side, and we also need to apply it. And that's one way of doing it if you don't have Mesh Machine. What I like to do is in edit mode. Mesh Machine also has a mirror tool, and the shortcut for that is Alt X, and I can use that and then swipe to the direction I want to mirror. Or I could move my mouse over here and just left click. And this will do the same thing, and I don't need to add a modifier and apply the modifier to do that. And then I can select this edge loop here, hit Ctrl F and do a fill. And I'm going to hit F again to turn this into an n-gon. And then I'm going to hit Ctrl B and add another bevel here. And I'm going to select this face at the center and delete it. And then I'm going to select these edges here again, do another Ctrl F, and this time I'm going to do a grid fill. Let's jump into the top view, and I'm going to change the offset and line this up with the geometry of the rest of the object here. Let's go back into object mode, switch to the top view. So now we can start copying this object around to complete the disk. And the easier way to do this is if you have a plugin called Radial Array. In this case, I could just array around the 3D cursor, which is at the center of the grid. You can't see it because I switched it off by default. So here it is. We can still use it though, even if it isn't visible. And all I need to do is go to Object, Radial Array, and use Array Around Cursor, and just change the number of clones to 10. And that's it. But if you do it the Blender way, it takes a couple more steps. So first of all, what I'm going to do is hit Shift and A, and I'm going to create an empty, and you can pick any one here. I'll use the single arrow. And then I'm going to select the original object, which I'm also going to rename to kitbash disk while I'm at it. And I'm going to add an array modifier here. And there's two things we need to do for this array modifier. We need to switch off relative offset, and we need to switch on object offset. And if you unfold this, you can see that the array modifier now needs an object. And we can either use this picker here to pick the object from the scene. We can also drag it down from the outliner into this slot here. And then we need to rotate the empty. Let's bring up the side panel here, and we need to rotate it around the z-axis, and what we need to do is type in 360, which is a full circle, divided by the number of copies that we need, which is 10. And if I do that, you can only see one more copy, and that's because we haven't changed the count in the array modifier. So let's change that to 10, and there we go. And now what we need to do is apply the array modifier. Delete the empty, we don't need that anymore. And let's see, I'll tab into edit mode, select all the vertices and merge by distance. And you can see we have quite a lot of vertices that got welded. And I think that's because I forgot to switch on the weld option in the array modifier. Okay, so that's looking good. And now let's go back into the top view. There's one more thing we need to add, and that's these cutouts here. I'll just select the reference image, bring up the side panel and rotate it around the z-axis like so. And that's just count how many polygons we need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let's hide the end panel. And I'm also going to hide the reference image now. Let's select our object, switch to a wireframe, tab into edit mode, and I'm going to, well, delete 3/4 of the object. So let's grab these words here, X, and delete vertices, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. Let's get rid of these ones, X vertices, and I think I missed a couple over here. So let's go ahead and select these, hit X again, and delete these vertices. And now we can go back to solid mode and polygon mode. And what I want to do first is use Ctrl R, and I'm going to add another edge loop right here at the center. And then I'm going to select 12 polygons, just check the scene statistics, and then switch to vertex mode and grab this vert here and use GG to slide it over a little bit. And I'll do the same thing over here. So in face mode, I'm going to select 12 faces. Just make sure that I actually have 12 faces selected, and then I can switch into vertex mode and slide this vertex over a little bit like so. Let's go into edge mode, And before I extrude that, I'm going to select the loop back here, and I'm also going to select this loop here. And I'm going to scale these along the z-axis to 0. And I'm going to move these back down a little bit. Let's do something like this. And while I'm at it, let's go into one of the orthographic views. And let's go back to object mode. I'm going to switch on origins up here, and then I'm going to move the origin down, hold down Control and snap it to the bottom of the object. And let's switch that off again. And now we can hit Alt and G to move the object to the floor. Let's go back into edit mode and face mode, and I'm going to select all of these faces here and all of these ones and extrude these down, hold down Control and snap to these bottom edges here. And the extruded faces are still selected. Let's also select these ones here and hit X and delete those faces. And there's one more thing we need to do, and what we need to do is add control edges for these holes here. And because we already have so many polygons, and because the distance between these edges here is so small, I'm going to do something that you're actually not supposed to do in subdivision surface modeling, and that is I'm going to share a control edge between these two edges here. So what I'll do is I'll loop select these edges here and deselect the one at the center, and I'm going to dissolve the rest. And then I'm going to loop select these edges here around this hole and the ones around this hole here, and use Control B, and let's do something like this maybe. Okay, and then we need to fix this area here, and we can do this in a number of ways. One way would be to grab this vertex here, move it over and snap it to this one, and do the same over here, and then just select all the vertices and hit M and merge by distance, and you can see two vertices got removed. But like I said, usually you don't do that, so we're sharing a control edge between two details. But in this case I can live with it because it's going to save a lot of polygons. And this edge I'm going to slide over a little bit, like so. And I think we're finally done with this object. So what we can do now is use a mirror modifier. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to add a mirror modifier here. And you can see something weird happens. I'll just undo that, bring up the side panel. And the reason this happens is because the rotation is off on this object. So all we need to do to fix that is hit Control A and apply the rotation. Hide the end panel again, and let's use the mirror modifier again. And we need to mirror across the X and Y, and actually also across the Z, right? And because there's nothing else we need to do, we can either keep the mirror modifier or we can apply it. I'll just keep it and add a subdivision surface modifier on top of that. Let's have a final look without the wireframe. And that is our finished disk. I hope you found this tutorial useful. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you again soon.